Hello, this is my magic bell. My name's Kenny Mammarella-D'Cruz. I've been running men's groups for 16 years, and we start with ground rules that everyone checks out, and then everyone agrees to the ground rules or haggles, and then we've all checked in. And then I ring my magic bell, and we have 2 minutes. Don't worry, we're not going to have 2 minutes silence. We have 2 minutes silence to just get in the room, to feel where we are and leave our days and our thoughts and everything at the door. Feel ourselves in the group, and then we start. I feel the difference very often between the masculine and the feminine is the masculine, whether male or not, might disconnect and try and think about things and work things out. And sadly, the two most common issues that men bring to men's groups are what's wrong with me and how can I do me better. And I started the group 16 years ago because I was lonely, I guess, but I had I think it was about 18 of my close friends. Now, how could someone with 18 close friends be lonely? But I called these guys into my home after being abroad for 5 years, and I basically said to them, all of this party stuff and chasing money and power and sex and love and popularity and whatever it is, it's all well and good, but I need to be met at some depth. It wasn't about the razzmatazz, it wasn't about drinking and drugging and partying and trying to fill the hole on the outside. It was about being here and now and meeting in a place that's real. And that is the thing that I have found has changed lives. It's not thinking about it, it's not putting on a good show, but it's having a space where we can sit together with our loves and our fears, with our pain and our histories, and just get real, be met in the place that might have broken the spirit and held us back. And in meeting in this place, you know, I could bring up a story in the men's group, and then we all talk about my issue and our issue and how we have this in common, and how as men and as boys we've struggled with them, and how we failed. So not everyone has to go through the same failure, and how we've succeeded. So rather than a hierarchical fix, it's a place to meet, a place to heal, a place to be, a place to let go of who you no longer are, and a place to experiment with who you really are, get some feedback, and take it out into the world. So that is the space for the individual, and from there, I would say one of the most important things for men and boys is to be one of, is to be part of community. So as I accept myself, I will allow other men to accept themselves, and in community we get to grow and share and pass it on. Apart from the men's groups, we've got open and closed groups. The closed groups are the same men they commit to 6 months batches, and most men stay for years and years because it's a space that they can be who they really are. So we have the open groups and the closed groups. That last scene was that camping. We go camping once a year, we light fires, we hire a place and smash things up if we need to, or shout, we draw, we did a trip to Morocco, and it's, rather than me being the leader and, you know, the big one, I'm one of the men, and people say, let's do this, let's do that, and stuff happens. So this true, non-hierarchical, open community. The most wonderful thing that has happened over the last year is we've started running Men Facilitate, which is training men and women to facilitate their own groups, to take into their own communities. So it's not come and join us, it's more come and pick up whatever tools you need to pick up and go and do it your own way in your community. Now, a quick question. So it's called MenSpeak, and if you check out, I think we call it the negative spaces, there's a man speaking and a man listening. That's an important aspect to speaking, is being heard. Now, the whole thing, the whole man up thing, I've kind of turned it around to man up and talk about it. My belief is the fear of humiliation and the fear of abandonment are amongst the biggest fears for men in any situation. And one of the most courageous things men do, as far as the men's groups are concerned, is coming to the first group. And once they've come to the first group, then it's easy. It's just, it's like the new boy in class. Everyone's going to have a best friend. I'm going to be left out. Everyone else will know how to do this. And the last one in is going to be humiliated, and so it goes on. And very often, it's the boy feelings that can run the men. And one thing we do in the men's groups is allow ourselves, remind each other to be present and connected. So once there is the fear, amongst us we'll talk about our fear. And we might talk about where we think it's come from, but the checking round with the men's groups, the first question is name, the second one is I feel, and we get straight into the feelings, and some men it might take a little while before they know what they feel, because it's just quite normal in society to think about what the right answer is rather than what do I feel, let's not go in here, this might get dangerous, I might cry, I might lose control, I might say something that's true but vulnerable. So one thing that we learn to do is get into the feeling, well, fear very often, and take a breath and follow the feeling, and amongst this, with support from each other, it's like, actually, in that breath, I went back to this incident in my childhood, and then we know that this is what needs healing, and this is just where it's playing out. So we use various tools, and a very, very simple tool is being present in the moment. So I used to blah, 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 rather than I always or I do. So there's space for change. And even just saying I, because so many men, generally in society, it's so much safer to say we, which means we're all the same and we're all victims of the same thing, or you, so it's totally depersonalized and there is no feeling, and if it's a you, then nothing's going to shift and change. I find in the groups we get a chance to unlearn what was normal and normalize what is alive. And I think from what you're saying, I think what you're talking about is from doing together to being together. And I find if there's a being together, then the doing can be so much more effective, more alive, more creative, more on the same side. Yeah, totally. And the interesting thing about the space is, it's a sacred space without being overly spiritual or overly anything. It's a space where we have agreed to the ground rules and it belongs to all of us as individuals. And who we practice being in the space, I feel, goes out of that circle and into our lives. So it's almost like we take the space with us. The last time I gave a talk at the RSA was in February, Time to Talk Day, which is Time to Change the Mental Health charity. And in the audience was a woman who I introduced to Bertie. And this is what happened. Over to you, Bertie.
So I met Lady B. Herbert, who runs a project called States of Mind, and it's all about mental wellness projects in schools. And it took like a good few months, but in the end she invited me to facilitate a men's group at a school. And it was in North London. There was about 10 of us, the boys were 15 to 17. And it was just so beyond my expectations. Like, I knew the men's groups were a powerful tool, but I wasn't expecting it to be so kind of transformative. I think the kids, they took a while to kind of warm up to the idea, and I think it helped that I sort of shared my own story, my own vulnerabilities and challenges I've had in my life, because they became a lot more engaged and were asking me a lot of questions afterwards, and felt safe enough to share things that were going on in their life, which were very heavy and which they probably didn't have a chance to share anywhere else. They felt that they couldn't share with their parents because they didn't want to burden their parents, and they didn't feel that they could share with their teachers or counsellors at school. A couple of them talked about deaths in the family recently, and went into quite some detail. So it was really moving and touching and meaningful.
Where's there the space for the men to speak and know that he is heard and know that he's not going to be smothered. I know that I found it difficult after my childhood, which was quite troubled and traumatic in a lot of ways, but also very privileged in a lot of ways because I had love. I found it difficult to speak about my feelings because we were quite raw in my childhood with our emotions, and we were very much like surviving and holding it together. Surviving and holding it together means don't be too vulnerable, don't break, because we might all break. Where this is a space where it's okay to really go there because it's held. My own issue, and that's with a lot of the men I'd say who've come to the men's groups, is if I start speaking, then maybe I'll be smothered. Maybe I'll be so kind of boxed in that they will squeeze a story or tears or whatever it is out of me, and there won't be any space for me. And I don't want to be smothered. There's nothing wrong with me. I want to be in my pain, or I want to be in my anger, or I just want to explore this, or I just want to get this out of me and amongst us, so I'm not carrying it anymore. It's so much less risky, as you've said, to stay in limbo and to not take that risk and to not come alive, to not love, to not be connected, because what if that is taken away? And I know for me, we had this conversation recently in one of our workshops about love, where most, if not all of the men said, after my first love, I decided that it's not safe to love. It's not safe to be open, it's not safe to be vulnerable, because when it happened before, I don't know how I survived it. So no one is going anywhere near anything like that. And that's first love. I mean, I think in that group everyone was heterosexual, so with the opposite sex. And I guess we're going further back here, because it's normal for little boys, I don't know if you remember, to have a best friend at a very young age, and it means the world. And can you remember the devastation when your best friend has a new best friend? That disconnection, that betrayal, and these issues, these hurts, these places of a broken spirit can work through all our lives, through relationships with business partners, love partners, whoever it is we work with. So it's getting to the core of the issues, unlearning them where it really matters, where it's really delicate, and bringing them into daily life here, and having not just the courage, but the self-awareness and the tools to live a good life and move it forward. Now, thankfully, the men's groups, 16 years on, have saved not just a lot of lives, but saved a lot of children. So many men. Our friend Noel Janice Norton was invited in to do a Men Father Day, and we ran a workshop, and this is like a lot of the men who came to the Men Father, I remember, God knows how many years ago, when they were coming to the groups with dating issues. So they've been part of the community, and it's like, how do we serve them as they progress? And they didn't want to be the worst of their fathers, they wanted to be the best of their fathers, and they wanted to bring things that their fathers didn't have to bring. So it's a place to not just unlearn, but to learn and improve. And it's a place to get over the survival and really start to celebrate life. So, man up. What on earth does man up mean? What does it mean, would you say? What has it traditionally meant? Probably shut up. Yeah. Stiff upper lip. Don't let it quiver.
Conform to the archetype.
Yeah.
Conform to the tough person whose strengths are not showing any weakness.
It's really interesting listening to you because as you were speaking, all these things, as they're disowned or suppressed, I wonder where they go. And for me, this is where addiction, abuse, bad behavior, a shadow, another part that needs expression somehow. It's very dangerous how that shows up. Men have the courage in the groups to say, I have been thinking of ending my life. And for me, it's so normal, sadly, for men to think and think. And generally, the only conclusion with thinking is, I've tried everything, I have pain, and I need to stop the pain, so this is the only thing left, it's the only option. Or I can't think myself out of this, and I can't control everything that I'm scared of happening, or I can't get over what has happened, it owns me. Therefore, my only solution is to simply remove myself from the situation. And none of this includes any feelings or any community or anything to do with life. This is everything to do with thinking, controlling, and surviving. And the turnaround that we share is from surviving into living. And that shift from surviving into living is often the biggest risk that we take, because being out of control, so many men would rather be out of life than out of control because it's safer. Another thing that's so important that you brought up is I feel that I'm living a life of absolute luxury in a time when we have choice, where so many people, my parents, my grandparents, so many people didn't have not just choice, but even the space to consider things, the space to consider options. There was survival, there was PTSD, there was the war, there was poverty, emotional, financial poverty. But now we have the space to think, how shall we raise our boys? How shall we communicate with the people we love? How do we live? How do we get things wrong and put them right again, rather than get things wrong and justify that it was right and everyone else is wrong, which is the old-fashioned kind of man-up way. And what we've tried to do, and I feel what we have really successfully done, without this is the way, but what is your way, is we're learning to man up and talk about it and train people, men and women. We have a lot of therapists and coaches and people who want to run men's groups in their own community. Women who care for men, whether they're older men or in care homes or professionally, coming to Men Facilitate and learning to communicate with men. So it's bringing out, it's asking the right questions that are open, bringing out the best, making a space for them to be safe, to just take a first step into living, into telling their story, into not being owned by their story anymore, but knowing themselves, knowing their story, and writing a new script. It's like turning, this is one of my corny lines, turning old stories into gold stories. And the gold, I generally find, is when people unlearn whatever it was that they made their minds up about themselves when there was pain. As they unlearn that, they generally pick up a tool for their pathway or a clue for what they're here to do, what brings them alive, or what gifts they're now ready to share with humanity. And so many men have kind of realized that this is the thing that stuffed me up. Now, I don't want other people to feel that pain, so now I can do something about that. And I don't need to be devoted to that, that can be part of my life, but I need to live my life. I need to be true to me, present, connected, feet on the ground, open heart, and pass it on. And people pass it on. So we've hijacked Man Up, and we've turned it to Man Up and talk about it. And it's only in the last few months that I was at a conference and a few people said to me, you've been doing this on your own, surely you should have some support, surely there should be, some organization or something behind you so you can scale it up and take this into society. And I thought, great, I'm running some groups, I'm running a dozen groups or workshops a month. Great, we're doing Men Facilitate so other people can train. But now it's time for a big leap. Now it's time for, I hope, to be able to take this into communities, through the NHS, local government. I don't know how it works. The guy before us was talking about prisons, into prisons. This was my idea, through my own need, of the questions that need to be asked to open things up. So it worked for me. It worked for my friends. It got seriously out of hand because now there are like hundreds of lives that have been touched and a lot of groups that have started. Now it's time to scale it up even more. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a trained or qualified therapist. I take part the same as everyone in the group. I don't inflict my rules or ground rules on any of the groups. So if anyone says, instead of doing that, why don't we do that? And if everyone agrees, then everyone agrees. So I hold the space for whatever needs to emerge for myself, for an individual, or for the group. I don't have a certain set of tools or a code of conduct or anything like that. The tools that I have are to hold a safe space and open conversations, and then enable things to happen as they wish to happen. When I have been to therapeutic groups, and I go to supervision, and my supervisor's a therapist who also runs men's groups, they are the hierarchy. They're the ones who kind of have the power and people speak to. They have the answers and listen. So they're not really part of the group the way that I or the other facilitators are part of the group, and people don't address them. People in our groups address each other. I mean, in the open groups, they generally speak to the facilitator because it's an open group and it's like speaking to the leader, but it's about non-hierarchical, open community rather than this is the place to bring your wounds. It's also a place to celebrate and to explore. I remember actually 3 years after a therapist came to a closed group with his hard luck stories, and I had the devil in me, and I said to him, surely your life can't be that crap 3 years on. And he looked at me in shock and he said, well, I kind of wanted to get my money's worth. So some people will bring pain because that's the way they feel they'll get most gain. A lot of people just want to hang out. A lot of people want to experiment with different parts and different sides of themselves. I have some of my best friends come to men's groups, and I see them out of the men's groups, and it's just a different zone that we meet in. As you said earlier, men are used to doing together. This is a part of being together, and there are so many aspects of being together. When one of the closed groups self-organized to go on a trip to Morocco, it wasn't a therapy group of us against them or anything like that, but we regularly checked in about how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about each other, any incidents that have gone on, what this reminds us of. So it's all about being Columbo, which is feeling what as individuals, and then having a space to compare the notes. So it's, what is life telling me? What am I hearing in the group about me? How is life treating me, and why? And once we know why, then it gives us power to think, well, if this is what's going on and this is my belief system and this is how I'm responding, and I want that, then what do I need to change in me? Or which old story am I running? That's an old story that I could now unlearn and see what my outcome is. So in the closed groups, for example, we have a WhatsApp, community around. So if anything happens to someone and they're confused, or someone's depressed, or someone's had a baby and they want to share, then we share it. It's community. I believe in a lot of therapeutic groups, you only speak to each other in the group. You don't have community or conversation out of the group. And it's that kind of a situation where with our groups, it's a place to be, a place to build relationships, and a place to build community, a place to change, where usually in people's lives, it's difficult to change because, in my family I'm known as this, in my work I'm known as this, with my friends I'm known as this, and if I don't play those roles, then they might not like me, or it might not fit. Training them, I'm sharing my tools. So here's a structure for a men's group. If you, here are some tools to do with communication. So it's quite simply being in the present and owning what you're saying and various other tools. And it's also what happens if this kicks off in your group. What happens if someone says that they are suicidal? What happens if someone is anti-women or anti-men or on the verge of causing harm to someone? How do we deal with these big issues if they come up? So it's a place where men's fears can be purged to enable them to just carry on and run groups. We produced this very simple. We have a few ground rules, check-in round. So anyone like that at the drop of a hat can basically get on with it and have conversations within their own communities or with strangers. And you can download this from mensgroups.co.uk, where there are a lot of videos that explain what's behind the ground rules and behind the questioning. So it really is get on and do it, take it into your community. And then in the training program, which is just a day workshop, people get to experience a group, experience facilitating a group, hear about other people's positive and negative reactions from people, their experiences in the group, and go beyond the fear to empower themselves to take it into their own communities or into their work or into wherever it is that they kind of feel drawn to experiment with it. It doesn't work for everyone. It's not necessarily for everyone. A lot of men who come are scared of men. And maybe they had a bad time in boarding school, maybe they're being bullied at work, and they're more comfortable with women, and that's where they are emotionally met, and that's where they know they're not going to be bullied, humiliated, etc. So it could quite be how to deal with people's fear. So all the questions are answered, but for me, it's me sharing my tools, and then they can take it into their communities, change anything and everything to adapt to their community to best meet their community.
The value of what you're doing really fundamentally is creating a space where people, men, can come and just speak and run the risk that they might be judged, but fundamentally that the ground rules they're not judged, and they can feel listened to.
This is a very bad business model for me, but I see private clients as well. And it can get to a stage, it often gets to a stage where I say to my client, there's not anything here to be separate about, to fix and to talk about. You know what you need to know, you have the tools. Now, how about we stop working one-on-one in a room and you come into a group and you start practicing. So it's almost, there's in the room, then there's the holding place to experiment with, connecting with people, with the world, etc. And through that, that's the stepping stone into life. But what I find is, whether it's with private clients or in men's groups, is people get all the fears of who they don't want to be or think they are or what might happen in check. And rather than putting all that confusion out, they get very clear about who they are, who they no longer need to be, and what's no longer going on, that was the past. And as that frequency goes out into the world, or energetically that goes out, they attract goodness. So from all the fear and destruction and the chaos, they have a sense of self. And they have a space that they kind of feel, this is me, these are my boundaries, and this is true here and now. And then life changes. It's not that they know how to survive life better, but they attract a life that's true for who they are now, rather than continuing the old scripts that they know how to survive. So for me, it's from surviving and attracting things to survive, to continue surviving and pretending to be in control, into living and having the tools to respond to life, rather than react and create Groundhog Day. It's not just breaking my own script, it's also breaking the family curse, because the normality of family secrets and lies, pain, whatever it is that's been survived, doesn't need to continue. And it takes one individual to break the cycle and to get cosmic for a moment. It's not just passing it on to those that come after us. Somehow, it breaks the spell. It almost sets the ancestors free. Am I getting a little bit too woo-woo now? And to use two of my little cliches, it is allowing men to man up and talk about it, and as they do, they go from am I and a sense of self by passing power out to other people and getting a sense of what other people say into I am. So they exist in alignment with themselves and extend from there, and that is life-changing.